In the spring of 2011, Briar Glen, Ohio, was a town where nothing truly terrible was supposed to happen. Population 18,000, to high schools, one police department, and a crime rate so low it barely made regional reports. That illusion shattered on April 14, 2011. At 8:37 p.m., 22-year-old college student Emily Harper left her shift at a local diner. Security footage showed her walking to her car alone. She unlocked the door, got in, and was never seen again. Her car was found 3 days later, parked behind an abandoned grain warehouse. The doors were unlocked, her purse sat on the passenger seat, her phone was gone. There were no signs of a struggle, no blood, no witnesses. Just silence. Police initially labeled it a possible runaway case. Despite her family's insistence, it was impossible. Emily was weeks from graduating nursing school, had a steady boyfriend, and no known history of mental illness or debt. Briar Glen police didn't treat it as an abduction, not yet. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. Then, in September 2011, 5 months after Emily disappeared, another young woman vanished. Her name was Danielle Brooks, 25, a single mother who worked nights at a pharmacy. Her car was found in nearly the same condition and locked, purse inside, phone missing. The similarities were impossible to ignore. To women, both in their 20s, both last seen alone at night, both cars recovered in isolated areas. But the police department refused to publicly link the cases. Privately, detectives began to worry. There was one detail not released to the public. In both vehicles, investigators found a faint, almost undetectable chemical odor. It wasn't gasoline or cleaning solution. It was something industrial, specific. Samples were sent to a state lab. The report came back 3 weeks later. Traces of chloroform. Not enough to indicate large amounts, but enough to suggest exposure. The report was logged, filed, and according to later internal reviews, never actively followed up on. Why? That question would haunt Briar Glen for the next decade. By 2013, 3 more women had disappeared, all within a 40-mile radius. All between 20 and 30 years old, all last seen at night. The media finally started paying attention, asking, is there a serial abductor in Briar County? The police chief, Robert Kessler, dismissed the idea, stating, there is no evidence of a serial offender operating in this area. We believe these are unrelated incidents, but inside the department, detectives were frustrated because there was evidence sitting in the evidence locker. In 2014, rookie detective Marcus Hill was assigned to review cold cases for digitization. He started with Emily Harper's file. He noticed a handwritten note in the margin of the chloroform lab result. Cross-check with Warehouse District. There was no follow-up. Marcus dug deeper, pulling Danielle Brooks' file. Same chemical trace, same Warehouse District. Then he found something else, a partial fingerprint recovered from the inside of Emily's passenger door. It was usable, but had never been run through the national database. The fingerprint card was marked pending, and then nothing. When Marcus brought this to his supervisor, he was told, those cases are politically sensitive. Briar Glen's Warehouse District was largely owned by Galloway Industrial Supply, a manufacturing company that employed hundreds, funded local charities, and sponsored police events. Its CEO, Thomas Galloway Jr., was a prominent donor to the mayor's campaigns. The abandoned grain warehouse where Emily's car was found, owned by a Galloway subsidiary. Marcus's request to interview employees was denied. In 2015, everything escalated. A construction crew demolishing an old storage building near the industrial park discovered human remains. They belonged to Danielle Brooks. The medical examiner ruled her death a homicide by blunt force trauma. The pressure on Briar Glen police became unbearable. The FBI was finally called in, and that's when the failure surfaced. Federal agents quickly identified a pattern local police had minimized. Every disappearance occurred within 3 miles of Galloway-owned property. Every victim's vehicle had traces of industrial solvents consistent with Galloway facilities. And every victim was reported missing within an hour of leaving work, suggesting someone was watching them. The FBI requested all evidence, including fingerprint cards. They made a stunning discovery. The partial print from Emily Harper's car had been run once. It matched an employee of Galloway Industrial, maintenance supervisor Eric Vance, but that match report had been quietly sealed. Why? Eric Vance was the nephew of Police Chief Robert Kessler. The timeline now looked different. In 2011, when the first disappearance occurred, Kessler was chief. His nephew worked at Galloway facilities near where the cars were found. A fingerprint match existed, yet no arrest, no interrogation, no warrant. The case stalled. When confronted years later, Kessler claimed the fingerprint match was inconclusive, but internal emails told a different story. One message, obtained during civil litigation, read, "We need to handle this carefully." This could damage the department. The email was from Kessler's official account. In early 2016, the FBI interviewed Eric Vance. He denied knowing any victims or being in their vehicles. When asked about the fingerprint, he claimed he occasionally did roadside assistance. There was no record of that, but there was also no direct evidence placing him at the abduction scenes, until a search warrant was executed. Inside a storage unit rented under a false name, agents found something chilling: women's driver's licenses, 8 of them, including Emily Harper's and Danielle Brooks, along with duct tape, industrial gloves, and containers of chloroform. Eric Vance was arrested on March 3, 2016, but the case didn't end there. Investigators soon discovered something even darker. In a hidden compartment were handwritten logs, dates, times, descriptions, surveillance notes. Vance had been tracking women for years, noting routines, parking habits, work schedules. He described how he'd approach them, pretend to need help, and use chloroform-soaked cloths. There were 9 names listed, 7 confirmed victims, 2 unidentified. The bodies of 5 women were eventually recovered in remote wooded areas. The town of Briarglen was devastated, but anger quickly replaced grief. Had the fingerprint been acted on in 2011, at least 5 women might still be alive. In 2017, Robert Kessler resigned. He was never criminally charged. An internal affairs investigation concluded insufficient evidence to prove intentional obstruction. But civil lawsuits alleged negligence, conflict of interest, and willful misconduct. Emails showed Kessler personally intervened to prevent a formal interrogation of Vance in 2011, arguing not enough probable cause. The FBI disagreed. A federal review concluded the failure to pursue early forensic evidence significantly delayed apprehension. Someone protected him. He never elaborated, never named names, but the implication was clear. Today, Briarglen looks the same on the surface. But the trust is gone. 5 officers left the department. New policies require outside agencies to review cases involving relatives of department employees. The evidence locker is now digitized and audited quarterly. But for the families, none of it is enough. Justice delayed wasn't just procedural, it was fatal. The story of Briarglen isn't just about a serial predator. It's about silence, about power, about how small-town loyalty can become a shield for something monstrous. If the fingerprint had been run properly, if the warehouse had been searched sooner, if the chief had stepped aside instead of stepping in, how many lives would have been saved? That question lingers like the faint chemical odor found in those abandoned cars. Almost undetectable, but impossible to ignore once you know it's there. Some residents refuse to believe the department failed, others insist more people were involved. Rumors circulate about missing files, erased surveillance footage, campaign donations. None proven, but one fact remains undeniable: the evidence existed, and it sat untouched for years. In true crime, we often focus on the killer, but sometimes the more disturbing story isn't about the predator. It's about the system that let them operate. In Briarglen, the evidence locker wasn't just a storage room, it was a graveyard of missed chances. And behind every folder, every untested fingerprint, every ignored lab report, was a life that might have been saved. If you listen closely, the town is quieter now. Not peaceful, just quieter, because once you know what silence can hide, you never hear it the same way again.